program, by the way, at Miami. Now, Friday we had a lot of discussion about Florida State's AD and a board of trustees meeting, and we had Matt Baker from the Tampa Bay Times on the show. A lot that went into it. Over the weekend, this was on, this was actually late Friday. Clemson AD Graham Neff, unequal distribution of ACC revenue, a need. I don't have to read the whole story to you. You knew that once Florida State put it out there, that then Clemson might be next or North Carolina might be next. So that's simmering. Patrick Craig is going to join us, former Fox Sports executive. He and Bob Thompson have been absolute must-go-to guests we've had on really for the last year or so. But now Clemson. And so here comes the momentum. Can it ever reach something that is going to change what ESPN has? ESPN holds the cards here. They're the ones that own the television deal.
Yeah, it's kind of weird for ESPN. By the way, Kenny Evans on a $5 super chat kind of set us up for this. He said, think of it like this. UCF, by joining the Big 12, makes more money than FSU among many other teams in the ACC and the Pac-12. And don't think that that doesn't have something to do with it, especially from a school in the same state's perspective that has a much longer and more decorated history, better television ratings, apparel sales, and everything that you could even imagine than UCF. And I'm not trying to dog UCF, but they're new money. And so FSU's looking at themselves going, well, hey, this is inequitable here. Clemson, obviously, who's been the class of that conference for a decade now, and the team that everybody's, scared of out of the ACC consistently, obviously feels the same way that FSU does, and for the exact same reasons. So it wasn't going to be surprising that once Michael Alford said something, that Neff was going to say something, and then so on and so on. Now, this might all be posturing until they can figure out the grant of rights. And, I've read a lot from both sides about, reporters asking the administrators, like, well, you can say all this, but, why would Boston College just all of a sudden give you guys more money, seeing as the grant of rights is for so long? And their answer is kind of the same, as they feel like they've got an idea of how to challenge that. But again, nobody knows how that's going to end. So it might be false bravado. I would think the first wave of this might be asking for more of the new playoff revenue based on maybe like a merit system or something like that, of who's in there and who's doing that so that they stay there. But again, no reason for them to agree to that.
I saw a thread on Twitter, and it was that, listen, the problem with Texas and OU decided it was time to move on. There was only a couple of 2 or 3 years left in the grant of rights or in the TV deal. There's 2036 staring down the ACC. Yeah. So it's a little bit easier that Texas and OU could at least see that, well, we'll just kind of negotiate that down, which they did, because it was just a couple years left, 2 or 3 years left. It's a little bit different when it's 2036 and it's only 2023.
It very much is, and that's what really is the problem. The other issue, and this is an interesting side note, but so ESPN owns the ACC network, correct? If the best teams in the ACC left the ACC, how much value is there to the ACC network? So ESPN's in a weird spot here because, say, the teams that left went to the SEC, the network that it also owns, and they, all together. So now you have exclusive rights with these two conferences, but you've robbed Peter to pay Paul, and Paul's already getting paid, right, on the SEC network. So is the juice worth the squeeze on ESPN's part, or is there another solution in here we're not figuring out? Because if the ACC network is just the schools that they already know don't get great ratings, then how good is that going to be for them?
Yeah, the unequal revenue sharing has not worked. It doesn't mean it can't work, but I think that it really, if you are in survival mode, maybe you agree to that if you're not an alpha. Maybe that could have happened with the Pac-12. Even with USC and UCLA leaving, maybe that still might happen. Maybe Washington and Oregon take less to be a part of the Big Ten. But again, that money has to come from somewhere as well. And Patrick Craig, again, will join us. We'll also have Brian Howell, who covers Colorado. We've tried to touch on almost every fan base that covers anybody Pac-12 the last few months about the TV, the upgrade, what do they need, what do they want, and how are they thinking on various campuses.
So still no Pac-12 TV deal just yet.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Craig. And again, I know.
I mean, I do want to comment on the ACC first.
Okay,
and just
go
say,
ahead.
like, I mean, how many teams are going to demand the revenue sharing? Is North Carolina in that group too?
I would think so.
Is Virginia Tech going to say that? Are they too low? Virginia? I mean, who
Yeah,
all
like
gets
who are we to say that, right? Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm just saying who all is going to demand that they get a share? And so then how uneven are we talking? Are we talking 6 schools getting more than the other remaining? Are we talking about just a couple of them? Well, then that's going to piss off North Carolina. That's going to, tick off Louisville. I mean, so who all gets to go grab a little extra out of the candy jar? And then, if there's 6 schools that are all grabbing more, then, is that a little bit too much to bite off for the rest of the schools going, now, wait a second. Like, I can kind of understand Florida State and Clemson flexing their muscles, but now we got like 3-4 other teams that are demanding, like, we want this, or basically we'll make this as unsteady Eddie as possible until, the end of this contract. But you're right. It's the length of that contract that makes this all very unrealistic, anything happening relatively soon. I mean, as in, I see people who typically wouldn't talk realignment, but now it's fun to talk it because, the timing of it all, and it's very interesting stuff. And, I think that there's this fervor now, like, here comes the ACC, and there absolutely is a story there. But the big question mark is just how realistic are we talking about something actually occurring relatively soon with this? Or is this something that literally 8 more years are going to go by before anybody can really make a move that's realistic? You know what I mean? Whereas with the Big 12, you kind of knew, like, hey, the contract's coming up. There's something there. The Pac-12, we weren't really eyeing that. I mean, some were, actually. Some were I think, putting out, stuff in the tea leaves, like, hey, keep an eye on this. But, there's also a TV deal coming up. With the ACC, again, that TV deal is just such a dadgum albatross for them, man. It's ridiculous. And so, again, maybe they find a way to dismantle that thing or work their way around it. But the length of time on those contracts makes everything a lot more difficult than the other situations.
And I wonder, like, legally what precedent there is for the landscape has changed so drastically since we agreed to this.
If they wanted to challenge
that we need to look at it again, because I would think that if I was the ACC, I'd be like, hey, is this your name on line 1 and 2 here, Florida State and Clemson? Then, I mean, you could have maybe predicted this, or at the time when we were vulnerable in 2012, when the Big 12 was vulnerable and all these other things were happening, you could have left then if you were so miserable or whatever, because especially at that time, both of those schools had clout, as opposed to Florida State going through a 6-year period of just being bad until this last one, and Clemson being the team in the league that was, showing everybody that they were good at things. So I mean, it's such a weird thing to, like, argue in court that, well, the landscape has changed so drastically. Okay, well, I mean, you didn't foresee that coming? Well, that's your bad.
All right, so there we have kind of a look at what was part of last week that carried into the weekend and will carry in. This is February 27th. I know that a calendar switching into a new month doesn't mean anything other than what, February has 28 days. But you would wonder, with those in the Pac-12, March the 1st is Wednesday. It's right around the corner, and you wonder, you've heard about some of this, well, it needs to be done at some point, tick-tock, whatever. March 1st kicks in a new month this Wednesday. Turned around. Here we go. And so is that going to be something that matters, or just another date? Just another month that starts, and yet another first of a month coming up on Wednesday.
Well, I think it only starts to matter when you get out of this month, because it seems from everything they've started to let leak out that they expect something to get done here in the next, before the NCAA tournament ends in April. But if you start getting to April and you're looking at not only your winter sports ending, but your spring sports planning their postseason schedules, then you've got an issue, because, the summer semester's coming up and your TV deal ends after this year. And so can you get it done during the season? Those things, deadlines do make deals, but for the Pac-12, if they wait until football season to find out what their football contract is going to be for the next year, wouldn't seem like they'd be getting...
Yeah, because when the Big 12 renegotiated theirs or renewed or extended theirs, that was still, there was time left on it, right?
When's the next holiday stretch for the Pac-12 can be like, no, we've only not released it because we took Christmas off.
Memorial Day?
Yeah, with Memorial. Like, no, it's going to come out, but we always take Memorial Day off to stop the negotiations. Yeah, I mean, at some point, there's got to be an announcement. And, you know, we're not on a ticking deadline, like you said. I mean, I guess there's a general deadline where something has to give. But, yeah, I mean, given that negotiations opened months ago, and given all the talk about how fine everything is and, you know, concerns being blown out of proportion or being propaganda from another, you know, whatever you want to point at, I don't know how you're spinning the fact that it's almost the end of February and they're sitting here with less options than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, and so we'll see. They could, again, I think it'll be one of the more darkly humorous things that could happen would be if they were to have a contract that's slightly higher than the Big 12, you know, per team. Which I guess maybe Apple swings a big stick and just says, screw it, we'll just give you guys this money. That seems like that would be the Hail Mary to make that happen, because otherwise, yeah, the prospects don't look great. But we don't really know. We know there's been a lot of joking and cracking on the Pac-12. Maybe they have something up their sleeve, although it seems unlikely. But, yeah, I mean, it's crazy that it's taken this long for them to get that out there and get that done. So
March 1st is Wednesday. We'll see if the calendar changing to a new month matters or not. Has anyone in the Big or Pac-12 said, hey, we want to know something by March 1st? Is that some sort of does that matter? We're going to find out. That's just in a couple of days. And, again, that might come and go and nothing changes whatsoever. When we come back, more from